Welcome to Your College Bound Kid.
Podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
And you want a quality education that improves your professional network for the rest of your life. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I am Anika Madden, and I'm a parent. It is Thursday, August 1st, and welcome to episode number 79, The Role of the High School Counselor. In this week's news, over 60 and crushed by student loan debt. And we're in chapter 79 of 171 answers, and we're talking through what role your school counselor plays in the admissions process. And this week's question asks if they should join a scholarship society that is asking them to pay a fee in return for certain benefits. And Mark will be in his final part of his interview with Mr. Greg Roberts, Dean of Admissions at the University of Virginia, and Understanding the University of Virginia.
Anika, we have another exciting announcement for our listeners.
Do we?
You know we do. We discussed it last night.
I mean, do I?
We are inviting our listeners, friends of the show, listening family, to help us improve our podcast.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yes. And the way we're going to do this is by having you complete a survey that we have produced that asks things like, your college-bound kid would be better if blank, blank, blank. And I would like more interviews and article discussions on the following topics, blank, blank, blank. The whole survey would take less than 10 minutes, and we would include a link in every episode in our show notes. So you just see the little link there and click it. It's an online survey. We would be most grateful if you'll take 8 to 10 minutes of your time to help us make our podcast better. Anika, you have taken the survey. What are your thoughts?
I think you did a great job. By the way, Mark did it, everybody.
Throw the darts at me. Throw the darts at me.
No, because I think that's awesome. He texted me one day. I was like, I did this survey all night. So
well, you know how technologically challenged I was in the past.
Not anymore. You are like a tech guru right now. I'm like, I'm kind of like feeling behind. I'm like, dang, Mark is doing all of this.
You do not know me as well as I thought you did.
So kudos to you, Mark, for creating this survey. Yes, I did take the survey. It is great. There are a couple questions on there that ask you for written answers. And I told Mark, I'm going to be honest. I said, Mark, I normally don't like doing written answers on surveys, but our audience the feedback we get that you send to me every day, Mark, is ridiculous. So I know we got a special kind of audience. Y'all love to write. Y'all love to express your thoughts, and we so appreciate it. So here's just one other vehicle for you to do that, and that's going to help us get better. So thank you in advance.
Thank you. Okay, Anika, countdown time.
Mm-hmm.
And we are looking at the 12 reasons why people unsubscribe from a podcast.
I have to chuckle every time you say that. I'm sorry.
Well, the funny thing is, I think our regular listeners know this, but I kind of pick these countdowns out, and then I ask Anika what she thinks. And once she approves, she's actually learning about the answers the same time you guys are. So live reaction here. And so we are up at number 10, the most cited reason in the recent survey. What makes students, or not students, you see I'm up in the school world, right?
You're working. That's tomorrow, Mark, 8 o'clock.
Yes, you're right. You're right, exactly, 8 o'clock. Parents, not even parents, just people, unsubscribe from podcasts. And the number 10 reason is poor interview skills, bad interviews.
Ooh, I know that's not a problem with your college-bound kid.
Okay, so I have to say something.
No. I have to say something first because your interview skills are off the charts. I'm really proud of you, Mark, with those interviews. And I know people are telling you that, I know they're having a good time with these things, but I have to say, I've listened to several interviews and you are unparalleled. Seriously. I'm not just saying that because you're my podcast host partner or whatever, but you do a great job with those. Thank you.
Well, I guess we're all self-critical then because my story is not as positive. So
of course
it's not at all. So, you know this, Anika knows this about me, but I'm always listening to podcasts, but I listen to a lot of podcasts about podcasting, like how to do a better job. So I'm listening to this podcast about how to do more effective podcasting by one of these real podcast maven guru guys out here, one of the leaders in the field, and it's on interviewing. And then he says, I sure hope you're not one of these hosts who says, aha, yeah,
Yeah.
and feels you need to grunt in response to everything you agree with from your interviewee. And then he says, don't be that dude.
Mm,
And Anika, my first thought was, oh no, how can I go back? How can I go back and edit all my past interviews?
not. Mm-mm.
So I'm improving, though. I'm improving, but this is accountability, putting it out there and for everybody to hear. So it's all good. It was all good. Have you heard any podcasts where the interview skills were just like horrific?
Yes, they like ask questions after the person answers the question. It's just like it's horrible. You can tell they're on a script. I'm thinking of one guy in particular. Of course, I'm not going to name. And what's another bad thing? It's just not having good questions, just not having thoughtful questions. Just like, oh, okay, tell us about you, and and where are you from? And I mean, you do that too, but yeah, trust me, I've heard some bad ones. You're all good, Mark.
You know who's really good? Is really good. David Axelrod. I'm like,
I love David Axelrod. What's the name
yeah,
of it?
Axe Files. Axe
Yeah,
Files.
the Axe Files.
Yeah,
Yes, he's
trying
on
to
my
learn from
list.
him.
I do listen to him. He is good. You're right.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, let's go. Article time.
Article time.
I like that. Article time. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, Mark, this week's article is entitled Over 60 and Crushed by Student Loan Debt. It's found in the Wall Street Journal, written pretty recently. It's written this year by Miss Anna Maria Andriotis. And I'm just gonna be honest. Mark, Miss Andriotis or Miss Anna Maria threw out so many statistics that were overwhelming. I was over it. Like I was kind of drugged by it, or dragged, or drug, or whatever you say it, because it talks about how $86 billion was the last count for the amount of student loan debt. And this was just for the people age 60 and older. So it's about paying for their family to attend school, like their kids, their grandkids, whomever. And then, we had that big recession. So they were paying for themselves to go back to school to enhance their job prospects. So I mean, I'm telling you, Mark, I was seriously overwhelmed, including, all of the statistics, including the fact that their Social Security checks are being garnished, all because they've defaulted on a student loan or a Parent Plus loan. And we know that parent loans will, I think you mentioned this before on a podcast where we talked about this before, where the parents don't have caps on the loans like the students do by the government specifically. So what are we naturally going to do? We're going to make sure our babies are taken care of. So, I mean, I'm going to tell you, between the stats, Mark, and the photographs of the seniors she was she was spotlighting, who were, one parent or one grandparent or whomever that person was over $130,000 in parent loan debt. I could not take it. I'm sorry. So, Mark, do you have some special magic that you can take?
No,
All this
don't
away
have any
from us?
special magic. I'm not Bill
Can you give us
Gates or
something?
somebody.
'Cause,
I can share some light on it.
please,
And so,
something.
my first question is this episode is this August 1st or is it July 31st?
This is August 1st.
Freedom to read. Remember how you put me on read probation until the start of next month? I've been just waiting to break out.
Of course you were following that. Of course you were like counting down.
Of course.
2 months, but it's
So
okay.
time to read and then some comments. So here we go. Many of these seniors took out loans to help pay for their children's college tuition and are still paying them off. Others took out student loans for themselves in the wake of the last recession as they went back to school to boost their own employment prospects. On average, student loan borrowers in their 60s owed $33,800 in 2017, which is up 44% from just 2010. And that's according to data that was compiled by the Wall Street Journal, by Credit Reporting, and also from TransUnion. Now, student loan debt rose 161% for people age 60 and older in that 10-year period, or that 7-year period from 2010 to 2017. And that's the biggest increase for any age group, according to TransUnion. So, it went up for everybody, but where you saw the most exponential growth was the 60-year-olds more than anyone else. Some are having funds garnished from Social Security checks. The federal government, which is the largest student loan lender in the country, garnished these Social Security benefits, these tax refunds, and other federal payments of more than 40,000 people aged 65 or older in 2015. So that's a lot of people, Anika. I think over 40,000 people, not just 60 there, but 65. Well, I guess, of course, Social Security, um, that are having their wages garnished because of defaulting on either student or parent debt. Now, this is a crazy stat. And this was kind of a very depressing article. But the way I look at it, I actually love this article, even that it's so just morose, just because it's kind of like a scared straight article to me, Anika. Like this you're gonna see this again because I know you're coming on August 3rd to that all day summit that we're doing in Atlanta, and I'm gonna have this article in the files that everybody gets because do you remember a long time ago there was a show that came out called Scared Straight, and it was kind of like showing people you don't want to go to prison. I don't know if you ever saw that. It was like Scared Straight, and I was like,
Yeah, I did.
yeah. So that's kind of how I look at this article. It's like a Scared Straight article. So this increase that these 65-year-olds have, it says it is up 362% from the previous decade, and that's according to the latest data from the Government Accountability Office. And yeah, and it features these people. Like there's a 66-year-old lady in here and has her picture. And boy, she looks sad. She looks like she lost her whole entire family. And I can understand it because she has a $1,600 monthly Social Security check coming in, and she's got $29,000 in loans. And then it talks about Mrs. and this, and now I'm gonna butcher her name, but Grigassis said his decision to go back to school continues to haunt his life. He signed up for student loans to attend the Art Institute of New York in 2003 and 2004 after a restaurant venture had failed. And at the Art Institute, he studied culinary art and restaurant design and trying to upgrade his skills. Subsequent restaurant ventures didn't work out, and now he's unemployed. Struggling to keep up with rent and other bills, he went to Croatia for the summer to live with his elderly mother in Croatia. To pay for daily expenses, he relies on financial help from his family, and he often turns to credit cards to pay for food and other necessities. He limits his total food budget to $7 a day. Then jumping ahead, I'm skipping a couple paragraphs here. Seniors are finding they have to work longer, holding on to positions younger adults might otherwise receive. They're relying more on credit cards and personal loans to pay for basics. People 65 and older account for a growing share of U.S. bankruptcy filers, according to the Consumer Bankruptcy Project. And this is really important, so I want people to understand this. Unlike most consumer loans, right? Most consumer loans, think about loans, cars, credit cards, things like that. Student debt is rarely ever dischargeable in bankruptcy. So you can't even get rid of it. You're stuck. Now, perhaps the most surprising element of this surge is the rapid run-up in student loans, an issue that used to be mostly concentrated among young adults. Changes, maybe in the wake of the last recession, helped explain this shift. So one of the things I like about this article is that it doesn't just say that seniors or those who are 60 or over have a lot more debt. It goes on to explain why is it that this drastic shift has occurred in the last 10 years. And here's what it says. In the years after 2008, banks and other private student lenders began tightening their underwriting standards for their loans. They're requiring more parents to sign on to student loans along with the students borrowing. So they made it harder for students to qualify without co-signing. Co-signing makes the parents equally responsible for paying back the loan, resulting in a lower credit score and crimping their ability to borrow if they or their child ever misses a payment. Roughly 93% of all new private student loan dollars that are extended to undergraduate students during the current academic year include a parent or adult signatures on them. Now, that's up from 74% in 2008, 2009. So Anika, basically, after you have the financial crisis that we had, in 2008, just became a whole lot more difficult to get loans. And it was always hard for a student to get a loan in the past because they don't have credit histories.
Right.
But some of them were able to qualify depending on how much they had worked. And 74% of the time, parents that were co-signing private loans. Now 93%. So that's a big difference, going from 3 out of every 4 times the parent was on the loan to basically 19 out of 20 times the parent's on the loan. And that's according to a group called Measure One that studies this kind of stuff. Though federal loans still account for more than 90% of the outstanding student loan. Now, the private market for students' loans has been growing.
Of course.
And the reason, one of the big reasons for this is because one of the nice things about the student loan that the federal government offers is it has loan caps in place. It's designed to prevent irresponsible borrowing. But the loan caps are $5,500 for a freshman, $65 for a sophomore, $75 for a junior, and $75 for a senior. And a lot of times, Anika, when I'm sitting down with the family and they need kind of a lot of money for college and they want to go over the borrowing options with me, of course, I'll point right away to the Stafford loan or the federal direct student loan as the best option, right? And then and then I tell them the max is $5,500, and this has happened multiple times over the summer, where someone said, "That's it? $5,500 is the max?" In other words, I'm going to need a lot more money than that. And so this scenario then forces people to have to look for other means. So what do? They either go to private loans or they go to Parent Plus. The article goes on to say, in recent years, private lenders, including SLM Corp, better known as Sallie Mae, and Citizens Financial Group, have increased their focus on parents. They've rolled out student loans that are just for parents who want to pay for their kids' education. The loan's main pitch includes the possibility of a lower interest rate for parents who have high credit scores than what the federal government charges on parent loans. It also allows parents to spare their children the burden of debt they take on themselves. A spokesman for Sallie Mae says that parent loans account for 2% of student loan dollars the company originated. So, I see this a lot, Anika, where, parents feel like, I just don't want my kid to have any debt. And also then they end up taking it on. I know that's pretty common, actually. The final thing I want to read here in the article: the federal government dispersed $12.7 billion in new Parent Plus loans during 2017-18, and that is up from $7.7 billion a decade before, and then $3.3 billion before that. So you can see that's a pretty significant increase. And parents on average owed an estimated $35,600 in these loans at the time of their child's graduation. That's that's a lot of money, especially depending on what your income level is.
All right.
And so then they profile the guy that you mentioned from North Danville, Vermont, Anika. That was painful. This guy's got $136,000 in Parent Plus loans. He says each month he pays $1,100, or a quarter of his pay, and then his ex-wife pays another $800. So they're paying basically $2,000 a month, on the loans. And he says, I will be paying these back into my 70s. So, Anika, what were your takeaways besides just I think you were kind of depressed or scared, or just, I don't know what your reaction was, but it sounds like it was it's not fun reading.
It wasn't fun reading it. Dear Jalen, Janaea, and John, you gonna help me pay that stuff back, whatever comes up, by the way. And yes, we've already had that conversation. That's just to let y'all know what that letter was like. But I just wonder, especially in that case of that parent that has all that money, it didn't mention the child at all. Like where the child lived, were they trying to help? Like what's going on with the kid that actually got the education? So that's my big takeaway is hey, kid that's benefiting from all of this, what's your role in all of that? So yeah, that. How about that?
No, I absolutely think that is one of the problems that we have out here, is this mindset that I'm not being a good parent if I don't let my child go to their dream school, and no matter what it costs, and it's somehow my obligation to do this, and I have to fight this aggressively. That somehow got out there, and I don't know how it got out there, but you've heard me say this before, Anika. That's tantamount to you saying to your child, okay, whatever car you want to get, go get it. It's on me. And they say, okay, sure, why not? Let's do the Lamborghini. Let's do the Porsche. Let's do the Bentley. Like, that's crazy. And so first thing is parents have to establish parameters, the maximum amount that they are willing to pay. and you got to stay within those parameters. And if you don't make those commitments, the student will pay this, I'll pay this. I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to get sucked in by peer pressure. It could be from students, it could be from the parent peer group. You're going to get sucked in by just this desire to want to please your kid and make them happy. This thinking that you're not being a good parent if you don't give them the opportunity to go to their dream school. All of these are fallacious, by the way. And then the last thing is the marketing from the colleges. And when I say the marketing from the colleges, what do you think I'm referring to, Anika?
I'm thinking about how these families get these packages in the mail and say, "Oh, hey, here's a Parent Plus loan for you. Here you go. Now you can come." That's the marketing I'm thinking of.
So it's so many things, right? It's the glossy brochure that makes everything look great. They get you excited. It's the warmth of the tour guide and the admission staff on the visit, and how well they treat you. And it may not just be that. Some schools call people. It's everything from these fast apps and things like that, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later in our podcast. So it's all of that. It's all of that. Like, that stuff will seduce you. That stuff will suck you in if you don't establish firm parameters. I also think the point you made is valid, which is, students. The students have their whole life ahead of them to earn money. Like, some parents feeling like they need to do all of this, and some of them don't even have anywhere near the retirement that they should have. There's no loan out there for your retirement.
Right.
One of the reasons, Anika, why I wanted to transition to the role that I'm in now at KIPP, because before, I was doing part high school, part college, is a couple of families that I knew that I found out that I worked with really closely, sent them off to boarding school. And then I found out that the parents took out $100,000 in Parent Plus loans, and I freaked out because I know what some of these are not what these two families I'm thinking about are not wealthy. And so I'm like,
Oh my goodness.
yes, yeah, because people feel like they're being a bad parent. Some people do. And anyway, I don't want to get off on that too much because I'll lose it and I'll go ballistic, because it really, really, really bothers me. But having said all of that, with all of this sort of negativity, believe it or not, I had an amazingly positive breakthrough in the last 6 months, Anika, that I want to share.
Okay.
So I've always had a very clearly well-articulated view on what's the maximum amount a student should take out when it comes to student loans. But I've been ambivalent about maximum amount parents should take out. And I've stumbled around. I've listened to what all the gurus said. I've never really agreed with the different views that I heard articulated from some of the people that I respect the most when it comes to parent borrowing. And even like in my book, I don't talk about this because I didn't have a really clearly articulated, view on this. And, for a while I was saying, well, just do the loan calculators. I'll show you the loan calculators. I'll let you see what the monthly amount is. And can you handle that or can you not handle that? And that's kind of what I was doing. But I had a real breakthrough, and I want to share it because it's exciting to me. And I think if people will follow this, it will keep them from being in this quandary. And I don't know if you're familiar or not, Anika. Are you familiar with the 28-36 rule when it comes to borrowing?
Mm-mm.
So what the 28-30, it's going to get a little technical here, but tell me if I'm making it clear. So the 28-36 rule, what it says is that 28% of your gross income is the maximum amount that you should spend on everything related to your house. That's it. Okay. And I say your house, I'm talking about, and some people call this the front end ratio or the monthly housing total. Those are a couple terms you'll see for it. So it's principal, it's interest, it's homeowners insurance. Okay. If you have to have a homeowners, like a fee, if you're an association fee, that would be in there. If you have private mortgage insurance, all of that, everything to do with your house. Okay. Some people call it PITI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, right? No more than 28%. So let's take an example. Let's say a family has 10,000. Let's say a mom makes 60, a dad makes 60. So it's an income of 120,000 gross. That's $10,000 a month. 28% of 10,000 is $2,800. So you cannot pay more than $2,800 for your house, period. So that's the front end ratio or the monthly housing total. Was that clear or not clear?
That's clear.
All right. Now, the 36 is what's sometimes called the back end ratio, or sometimes called the debt to income ratio, or sometimes called total obligation. And what this says is all of your other loan debt cannot be more than an additional 8%. So those 28% for the house, 36% for the house, plus all your other debt. And by I'm talking about other debt here, I'm talking about things like student loans, car loans, alimony, child support, and one of the big ones, credit cards. All debt. It's not talking about things like food. So in that same scenario, $10,000 monthly income, $2,800 could go for a house, 8% could go for all of that other stuff: student loan, credit card, alimony, child support, all of those things I mentioned, and student loans. And so my new view is that this is a standard thing, by the way, that's used to qualify people when you try to buy a house. That's how I learned all this when I bought my first house in 97.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn this in order to know how much house I could afford.
Mm-hmm.
So this is saying, what I believe is, you just put the parent debt number into that figure, and that should help a parent know the maximum amount they can afford, as long as you stay within that ratio. Include the parent debt as one of the things in that other 8% of total obligation in there, with credit cards, student loans, and all the other things. What do you think? Does that make sense or confusing?
Yeah, it does. But where does like utilities and food and gas, because that stuff adds up pretty darn quickly.
It is, but remember
where does that but which one of those categories does that kind of stuff fall into?
Yeah, so that wouldn't be in either category, because you still have some money left over for like when you look at people's budgets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like some of their biggest expenses is their house, and then their food, and then their car, right? Those are some of the biggest things. But you still have another, even with the 36%, you still have 64% of your gross check.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what that goes for.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That goes for that. And so that's my new thing, and I think this can help parents. But this will help parents to stay within parameters when they want to know, well, how much loan debt should I take on? But having said that, I do want to say this caveat. I do think this is really, really, really important, that this is a maximum.
Mm-hmm.
Like, somebody should have no problem saying, I'm not comfortable even with that, because if you're not on pace for your retirement goals, then you might change that. That 8% for you may be 5%. But at least if you have some concrete number budget in place, it will keep you. We don't want you to be this guy with $136,000 of debt, making whatever he was making, $55,000. And I think hopefully hopefully this will help people who are trying to figure out how much loan debt as a parent should I take on. What do you think?
I think it's fantastic. And Miss Anna Maria Andriotis, thank you for the reality check. It was hard to swallow, but yeah, that was.
But need it. Sometimes we need to take our medicine. It was kind of like going to the doctor, right? And they're kind of telling you that you're going to have to take this shot or take this big horse pill, or I don't know. It's taking your medicine. I don't know if that worked, but I'm trying.
It did.
Okay.
I can so relate to that right now.
Good. Because I know you rate me on illustrations. I got a 4 out of 10, a 5 out of 10, and a 6 out of 10 in the last 3.
Spot on. Thank you, Mark. Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends, we are looking at the episode 79, which corresponds with the 79th chapter in the book I wrote called 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions. And the question today is, what role does my school counselor play in the process? Anika, you read the chapter. What do you think?
Well, excuse me. I think that it was good, as always. One thing that blew me away was that because I know you said that the college has, always turns to the counselor first for, just learning whatever they need to learn about the kid, right? I know they had to write the letter of recommendation, serving as the official link or whatever. But I didn't know that there was a question on that common application to the counselor about the student. I didn't know that was on there. So that was a shocker a little bit, I think.
So I want to say something more than that, Anika. There's a huge section, and it's called the secondary school report, that the school counselor has to fill out on behalf of the student. And there's a lot in that particular section that the counselor has to fill out.
Did not know that. Student. Did not realize that.
Yeah, like, for example, they have to rate your curriculum. Is it most demanding, very demanding, demanding, average, below average? That's one thing. But there are a lot of other things that the counselor has to do that talk about the character of the student. Like, of course, if there's a recommendation, if you choose to write a written recommendation, which a lot of big schools don't do, by the way, a lot of private and small schools do, but sometimes they do, and they know a kid really well. But the way the Common App's set up, it's more like a checkbox system, right? And even in the checkbox system, and I'm actually looking at secondary school report right now as we speak, Anika. And so some of the kinds of questions that they ask about the student, like they say, they speak, like here's one, for example: rate the student's personal qualities and character. Rate them.
Mm.
And they give you 6 boxes: below average, average, good or above average, very good, well above average, excellent, top 10%. It says right in there, top 10%. I mean, I'm actually looking at the official form. Outstanding, top 5%. And then it says one of the top I've ever encountered in my life, top 1%. Now, if you're a student and you have outstanding grades, but your counselor ranks your character on the low side, good
Mm.
luck getting into a highly selective school. You know, when I did it at admissions, Anika, we used to say this all the time, and it's really true, that we would rather take an academic risk than a character risk.
Mm.
Especially if you're in a residential community. You know, if you're in
Mhm.
a commuter school, it may not be as true, but if you're in a residential community where people are living on campus, yeah, you're very concerned with who are we bringing into the dorms and what impact are they going to have on everybody else. So, but here's the other thing. Let's just not get at bad character, because the average person, we've talked about this before, Nika, the national average is 482 to 1 in terms of the students to counselor, right? So most cases, counselors don't know their kids. So
Mhm.
if the counselor doesn't know you, how can they properly do you justice? By the way, in addition to that personal qualities and character rating, there's also an extracurricular accomplishment rating that the counselor has to do, an academic achievement rating, and then there's an overall rating. Overall, you as a person.
Mhm.
And by the way, there is a option for the counselor. I read below average, average, good, very good, excellent, outstanding, and one at the top, right? There's an option that says no basis. In other words, I don't even know the student well enough to at all have an informed opinion. And
Hmm.
and this is why, one of the reasons why you want to get to know your counselor, because if you say no basis, if they say no basis or negative, that's not going to position you well. But if you're one of those students that you got to know your counselor, you're in talking to him or her and seeking their advice about your career, your education, then they can speak, if not effusively, at least favorably about you, and it can make a really big difference. What do you think?
I think I'm stunned because let's go back to your question. How can they
Mhm.
properly rate you if they don't know you? And so I'm getting nervous about this now because John is going into an environment where he likely won't be in that more intimate environment that Jalen and Janae has been in, these boarding situations where the counselors do have a better chance of knowing the kid, right?
Right.
So what's up with that? Like, I mean, I get that I know what I need to do, but for all
Mhm.
those parents that are not listening right now, that will never ever listen to any kind of podcast ever in their lives, how does that person honestly rate this kid that they just don't know? We talk about these 400 to 1 ratios, 700 to
Or-
1 ratios with all
mhm.
these
Mhm.
kids. Something's got to happen with that. Like that's pretty darn alarming.
It is alarming, and of course, what the counselor does is they just check the no basis box, meaning I don't know the kid, so I can't answer it.
Mm, mm,
So that's
mm,
what
mm.
happens. But if I'm an admission office and I'm looking, and over here I've got no basis, I don't know the kid, and over here I've got someone who writes a nice little couple paragraph detailed write up and rates you highly. I mean, admissions is about risk reward, right? It's about
Ugh,
risk reward. Like, one
goodness.
looks riskier to me and one is safer, and so the purpose of this is to let people know that students need to be proactive at getting to know their school counselor. They
Mhm.
have more impact on schools that do holistic admissions on the final decision than people think. um,
Mm.
and I want to share something. So, it's funny. Sometimes I'm almost leery, like, do I share it or not? And I always feel like, you know what? No hold bars. That's always kind of been our point of this podcast. Like, let's just let loose and let's try to peel back the curtain and share things that really happen that people may not know about and usually don't know about. So I was doing an interview with one of our guests once, and we do our pre-interview meeting, and I was saying, should we talk to our listeners of the show about counselor calls? And then the guest was like, Mark, that's just so personal. I don't think we should go there. And I'm gonna go there because I want you to know this. And so, like, I do counselor calls in my work at KIP, okay, and I'm on the phone with schools. And when I'm on the phone, sometimes the counselor calls are such where they're just letting me know ahead of time what their decisions are. So I'm not like blown away by a kid walking in my office, disconsolate or whatever. They're giving me a heads up as a courtesy. So I'm prepared to know what counseling mode to transition into. But sometimes they're on the fence and they're like, Mark, we're on the fence about this kid. Like, what can you tell me? And what I say can make a difference. Now, the reason why some people don't like to talk about this and they kind of let this secret out the bag is because they feel like, okay, now people are going to come in and they're going to blame me for not going to get in and say, did you throw my kid under the bus? So that's why sometimes people don't like the public to know this. And mind you, this is something that this tends to happen at private schools, boarding and private day, and at more affluent suburban schools that are running full-blown counseling programs. This doesn't happen at most schools. Once again, this is the advantage of being in the kind of system that Janae and Jalen were in, right? Where those schools where your oldest two kids went, they were having these counselor calls.
Right.
When I was at Westtown, we did counselor calls. I'm doing them now. But the point is, I'm not going to, and some people may not understand this, but I'm not going to, one, sacrifice my own integrity, and I'm not going to misrepresent any student, and I'm not going to embellish a student. One, I'm not going to do it out of my own personal, all you have in this world is your reputation and your name. So I'm not going to do it from a standpoint of reputation, but I'm also not going to do it because well, you know what? I'm gonna tell a little story to prove a point. Now, this is a boarding school story, but it'll still make the point. I was talking to a representative one time at a boarding school, and we're talking about a particular organization who I won't mention. And I said, "What's your experience been with so and so?" And they said, "You're not gonna believe what happened." They said, "We got this kid from this organization, and when the kid got to us, he wet the bed all the time." And so we went back to the organization and we said, we've kind of built this trust relationship. We're pretty honest with each other. We share things with you. You share things with us. Like, did you know that this kid wet the bed? And the person said, well, we figured if we told you that, you wouldn't take the kid.
Oh my goodness.
But so that's boarding school, but it's the same principle. The point is, like, if you screw these people over, that they will say, you know what? I can't trust you anymore. And it will hurt kids for 5 to 10 years later from your school. So I'm not going to lie on any kid. I'm going to honestly depict how they are, and I'm going to tell the truth. And that is how trust gets built. And quite honestly, that's one thing that makes these schools value you as a partner, because if you're going to help them to learn things about the kid that they may not see in the file, then you become a more trusted partner. And that's what keeps them coming to. We have 160 schools coming to visit us at my school where I work this year, colleges coming in to do meetings with kids and to talk to me and our other 5 counselors on staff, And so the point is, if your child gets in and really gets to know their counselors, they have an opportunity to shine. And what makes a kid stand out to me? When they're proactive, when they take initiative for their own education, and they don't rely on their parents setting everything up, and they come in, they talk about their future. And then when they're responsible and they follow up, I'll run through the wall for that kid. So anyway, I've said a lot, Anika. I'm going to know what you're thinking.
I'm raw and uncut. It's the way I prefer it. I'm pretty sure it's the way everyone else is preferring it. It's deep though. It's just like, I'm still just stuck on that kid that just doesn't know, and here is this counselor that just has their little life in their little hands. And unless you've shown that initiative or just something, and it's not always to this. You want our kids, we always say the kids have to take ownership and, to accountability for their own lives. But at some point, these kids are just kids. So when do we recognize that? And when do we, specifically these counselors, when do they act on that?
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. You can't fault the counselors because when you have a 482 to 1 ratio, that's the national average, some places 700, some places 1,000. And remember, your job also, that's just a small portion of your job.
Right.
Your job is to do crisis counseling, intervention counseling, personal counseling, and all kinds of scheduling and logistics and schedule changes for all these kids on your caseload. Most of the time, the kids are coming in saying, I want to drop out, change this, change that. What do you know about this course? So it's just not humanly possible for people in that system to be able to do type of in-depth type of counseling. But what I will say, so the counselor is not at all to be blamed. But what I will say is this actually presents an opportunity if you're in a really big school. Any reason, you think you know where I'm going with this, Anika? Why do you think I say it presents an opportunity?
You mean to play this episode in the darn classroom? Let all of them hear it? And I'm so serious.
I know you are, but I wasn't thinking about that.
But let's go ahead and tap on that.
Okay.
I'm challenging anybody that's listening to this right now. Take up this darn episode and play it in your classrooms. Like, this is so serious. It's kind of making me upset a little bit.
Well, knowledge is power. And so that's why we're doing this podcast, to get the word out, but I'll tell you what I was thinking. But I do appreciate your point, Anika. It is, let's get the word out and our listeners can spread it to their network. So what happens when you're at one of these really big schools with these really large caseloads, right, is the schools understand that there's no way in the world that the counselors can spend this type of time with the kids. A recent study came out saying the average kid at a large public school gets 25 minutes of college counseling in 4 years. So they understand that. And so what happens is that from a school standpoint, the expectations are tempered. They are tempered. Oh, this is from a big, large school. Like, they probably don't know their kids that well. Mind you, if you're coming from another school where they know the kids really well, that can build trust over there. But the schools that do holistic admissions try really hard to not hold it against, the other kid, because they realize that it's not their fault, right? And they want talent from all places. But here's the positive side. It actually represents a tremendous opportunity, because the student at the large public school that learns what we're saying, they can go in there, build a relationship, get to know their counselor. And now it's actually, in some ways, it's easier for them to stand out because, well, I'll tell you really quickly. College student I was working with the year before last, I was talking to the college. About the particular student, and they said the detail that was in this student's application. This was somebody I was working with privately, by the way. So it was outside of KIPP. So they're coming from a really large school. And the college told me the detail that was in that application, like in that case, the principal wrote a really powerful letter. And they said, Mark, we just don't see that. Like, at these big schools, the principals don't know kids like this. And so it does present an opportunity, because the student basically was being given massive brownie points because we know they're from a big giant school and we don't expect the level of detail from that school that we're going to get from a boarding school or a small private day school. We don't expect it because it's impossible. But when we get it, wow, That's like asterisk, 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 asterisk. So believe it or not, this can turn into a positive for the student in the large school. What do you think about that?
I think that's fantastic. And I wonder, is this what somewhat of what the index score does from the College Board?
That's a good question. And so we're talking, of course, about the environmental context dashboard. And I'm not going off on that too long because we did 4 episodes.
No, but it's relevant, right?
It is
I wonder if
relevant. It's relevant
yeah.
because it that of course looks at it looks at a couple of things. It looks at disadvantage from the neighborhood that the student may or may not experience socioeconomically, crime, all kinds of other things. But it also looks at the student in the context of the school that they're at. So you can see how your scores compare to everybody around you. And so that's a focus that's a little different, Anika, because this is focused a little bit more on size of the counselor load. And that's not in that dashboard. It doesn't look at like counselor to student ratio.
Okay.
So that's slightly different. But I think it's still a good point that you brought up because we're talking about looking at the student in their context.
Mm-hmm. And the many disadvantages they have in many cases. Woo.
Right. But I'm preferring to see this as positive, right? Because like what happens is that if you're at a boarding school or a private day school or a smaller affluent public suburb with smaller class sizes and smaller school sizes, the school is used to getting all of this. So it's just an expectation that we're going to get detail from the counselor. That's an expectation. If you're in a big public school, it's not. And therefore, those who learn how to build a relationship with the counselor, and because what happens sometimes at these larger schools, Anika, it is that the counselor will sometimes actually write a letter or at least a paragraph for the kid that they really know or that they really like.
Mm-hmm.
I've had schools say that to me, like, hey, the school's writing detailed prose about this kid. We don't normally have that happen from the school. That's an indication to us of the impact that this kid is making. One last thing I want to say about the school, the counselor. It's the job of the counselor to put the student in context of the school. That's very, very important. So lots of the questions that they have to ask, I didn't read them all because there's so many on the secondary school report. They go into different things like, do you rank? Where's the student's ranking? Cumulative GPA? How does the student compare in all kinds of different other areas within the school context? It puts the student in that context of the school. The teacher is expected to talk about the student as a learner in the classroom. The counselor is expected to position us so that we know the role this student has as a contributor to your whole school-wide.
All right.
So question, are you more discouraged or encouraged?
I'm actually kind of overwhelmed. Because
You were overwhelmed about the money one before with the 60-year-old bed. This is the overwhelming episode.
Mark, but you know how I feel about kids falling through the cracks.
I know.
That's just one of my things.
That's probably
And
why you're doing this podcast to begin with. Your passion for that.
Well, yeah, fact, #fact. And yeah, it's very overwhelming. But again, y'all play this darn episode in your classrooms, please, or to somebody somewhere, and just spread the word. That's all I can say.
Hey, there should be some benefits for people for investing their time listening.
Mm-hmm. That was.
I feel like you need like a little. You need a glass of wine or something, or a nap or jog or something.
I'm like crying all over the place. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
You're so emotional.
Jesus. I am. And I've owned it. And it is what it is. I just can't help it.
But you know what though? That just means you care. Anika, before we transition, I know you've been moved, maybe even disturbed by this conversation, but I don't want to so overstate the importance of the counselor so that people get it twisted. I don't want you getting nervous. For a school that does holistic admissions, just keep in mind academic rigor, grades, test scores, teacher recommendations, other recommendations, and the student voice through personal statement and the college-specific essays, plus demonstrated interest in any number of institutional priorities are all going to play a role. Plus, I know I already said this, but I kind of feel I can't state it enough. Schools that do holistic admissions do not expect the same level of detailed knowledge or experience with the student from the counselor. If you have a child at a large public school with a high counselor to student ratio, they know there is a lot of talent at these schools and they want that talent at their schools in their community. So they will cut you a lot of slack if your counselor doesn't write a detailed recommendation, either because they don't have the time or because they don't know you well enough to do this. This is how holistic admissions works. It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Mark, our question is coming from Miss L in New York. And L wants to know, should I join a scholarship society that is asking me to pay a fee and promising certain benefits? Is this legit or is it a scam? And I understand, Mark, that several people have actually asked this question. So what say you?
So one indication that this is a question we need to ask, Anika, is I'm getting it from everybody. So I get this from my parents at KIPP in the day when I do college counseling, in the day. I get this from my private clients, and we've had at least 3 different podcast listeners have sent in this question. So it's about time we probably should answer this like 50 episodes ago. And you're probably going to hear a lot of passion for me in this topic because I have a very strong opinion on this subject. Any guess where I come down?
I'm gonna tell you my little story.
Yeah, tell us your story. Let's hear your story.
So what this totally reminded me of is this time Jalen got this letter in the mail, and he was like, "Oh, he's such a stellar student, and he comes highly recommended for this program on Emory." I don't even know if it's Emory, but I'm just gonna say Emory for the sake of it being a prestigious campus, or just a campus of legit being legit. And I can't even remember. I remember asking you about it, and you were like, "Suspect, red flag." And as I went back to that woman and I called her on the phone, I said, "Okay, so what's the agenda?" And she didn't even have an agenda. Like, there was no itinerary. There was nothing. I was just like, OMG. But she had us hooked. I mean, it was just like, oh, he's being recognized for this. And we were just all excited. And this was early years. And the fact that I talked to you and you suggested the red flag. And in fact, it was not legit. But I'm not saying this isn't. But I'm guessing that it is.
Well, you know what? I actually forgot about that. I remembered when you told me that. That was
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember our that was like 5 years ago. I remember that was a while
longer
ago.
than that. Way longer than that. Yeah.
7 years ago maybe. I remember that conversation now. So yeah, I'm like, run away. I do not like these, and there are so many of them. Anika, I'm literally opening something I got in the mail right now. I opened it yesterday from Joy, to the parents of Joy, and this is it. I am delighted to inform you that Joy has been nominated for membership into the National Society of Collegiate Scholars, and NSCS is an honor society that invites and elevates high-achieving college students while recognizing and rewarding members for a lifetime achievement. And it goes on and on and on, and it attaches all these benefits. First of all, it tries to appeal to parental pride. It definitely does that,
Yeah.
and let me say something before I read a little bit more. So, do you remember, Anika, when we talked about fast apps, VIP apps, priority apps, snap apps?
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you remember me saying this. That, by the way, our listeners, these you get these applications in the mail. And your student has said, you're eligible for $30,000 because of your tremendous achievement, or 20,000 or 10,000 or whatever. And we're going to make it really, really easy for you. We're going to waive the essay. We're going to waive the app fee. Just sign here, blah, blah, blah. And I get calls about these all the time. I got a call last week about one from a family in Philadelphia, listener of the show. And when we talked about this on the podcast, I should, I'll put in the show notes what episode that was. I have to go back and look. But you may remember I said, these are kind of brilliant from a marketing standpoint because they're doing 3 things. First of all, they appeal to your sense of pride or your, status, by singling out your child and how special and unique they are. That's one thing. Then they appeal to your pocketbook because they talk about money that you're going to save. And then they promise ease. Oh, this is going to be super quick, fast, and easy. So it's really attractive. Like, who would not be interested in recognition, status, money, and ease. And that's the same way
Mhm.
these things are. They're the same. It's the same threefold thing. We're gonna talk money. We're gonna talk status, and we're gonna talk ease. So going on here, I'm looking at this thing. As a member, you will receive a diploma membership, and it goes on and on. It talks about the society. University of Georgia is planning a new member induction ceremony. And this particular one, they say, is for students that have a 3.4 GPA. They say only 1 out of every 10 kids has this, blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on. And then they start listing all the benefits. So in the benefits, and you have to read the language really carefully. So here are just a few of the many tangible benefits available to you as a member of the National Society of Collegiate Scholars. Look, this year, NSCS will award 50,000 in new member awards to outstanding new members. Okay. This prestigious award can be used to defray any of your costs. So there's the money, right?
Mhm.
Okay. You don't know how many zillions of people they recruit and what your chances of getting it are. You don't even really know if they ever give it out. Then they talk about the induction ceremony that we're going to have, and they're going to give out these grants. So they talk about that. They talk about opportunities for travel and how there may be travel. Look at this. You may be eligible for the Semester at Sea scholarship. So now they're talking about broadening your horizon with these extra special experiences that you get. A remarkable shipboard educational experience. Semester at Sea scholars sail to nearly a dozen countries while studying on in
Mm.
ship classrooms. The program offers credit for more than 70 courses. And it talks about their distinguished scholars, it talks about their alumni, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And then the kicker, fork over your $95. It's all you need to do. Okay, and we get these constantly in the mail. I kept a stack of them because I knew that we were going to be talking about this on the podcast. Um, Another really really common one is called the National Society of High School Scholars. That's a very very well known one. NSHSS.
I see that bumper sticker so much. I'm just like, no.
Yeah, somebody got them on. They got them on the $75.
Oh,
They got
yeah.
them on the $75, and I don't know if you remember this before, Nick. Do you remember Who's Who of American high school students?
Yes, I
That was the old scam. That was the old one. And that was like went defunct, I believe, in 2007. So you don't see that one as much now, but that was the old one.
Mhm.
And so what happens is they just keep changing their names or new ones pop up. And these are not for profits. These are for profit organizations that
Mhm.
even if they, and here, so someone might say, well, are they giving the money away or are they not? So here's why they're a hustle and a scam. All the scholarship stuff they promise, they don't have access to any other scholarship databases that you can't access for free. They don't. So all they're doing is saying, they usually have their own little website because they want trying to make it look like it's their own thing, right? Here's our website with
Mhm.
all these scholarships. It is not any better, and it's usually worse than the free ones
Mm.
that are out there. So what are you actually getting? You know,
Mm.
and even when they talk about some of their other rewards, the chances of you getting that are so slim. Usually, it's like playing the lottery. May as well play the
Mm.
lottery and take your lottery proceeds and do it yourself.
So, Mark, are you saying that all of them are not legit, or could it be one or two that are legit out there?
I can't speak for all of them. There's so many, but here's what I'll say: is it a not for profit or a for profit? Um, why are they charging you that fee, and how is that fee being used? And
Mhm.
then this is my problem with them is how they misrepresent themselves in their marketing. Like
Mm.
they all the ones I see make it look like because you've paid this money, you're going to be eligible for all of these kinds of scholarships, and they don't indicate that you could be eligible for all these. You could access these scholarships on your own and do just as
Right.
well with the free. So
Right.
it's how they misrep. I can't speak for all of them. I can just say there's a lot out here that are set up as money making enterprises to
Mm.
make it. And nothing's wrong with the for profit business, but here's another thing. A lot of them claim like you have achieved this great academic. A lot of them mail these things willy nilly to so many people,
Mm.
and almost anybody's qualifying for them, but they make you look like you're this special applicant who's this rare person to get it.
Right.
So I just have a problem with something that's foundationally built on fraud. It's not built on honesty. So you've got people, their motive is to make money. And in order to make money, they do it by deception.
Mm.
And they overpromise because the benefits that they make you think that you're going to get, either you could get them for free or your chances of getting them are slim to none. So to me, it's a scam.
Mm-hmm. Seems like it should be
And I know I'm coming down harsh because there are some people, Anika, who say, wait a minute. So there's some community building components to these, right? So they get together and they have some gatherings and there are people, especially in like some homeschool communities and others, who have found value in having this network of other students to get together. And so, here's what I will say. If you're looking for a community of people and you're willing to pay the money to have a community, then I guess some people may feel it's worth the money to pay for. I personally have a problem with something that it's at the foundational level. It's a scam. It's a fraud. It overpromises and it misrepresents who it is, what it does, and your probability of actually getting these awards. Like the majority of people pay the money and they don't get anything other than, a badge, a ceremony, and some gatherings where people come together and they, and more exposure to other for-profit opportunities. Oh, you might not have won this, but do you know that we'll get this for you at a reduced price, and you can go on this, which is really a profit-making venture still. So look, it's not like it's gonna break most people's bank to lose $75 or $95 or whatever. Normally, they strategically position themselves to be under the $100 price point. Most of the ones I see are right in that 75 to 95 range. And so there certainly are some people that have got involved and they say, I met interesting people and we enjoyed the community gatherings. And so, there are people out there that feel like, it was worth my 75 or 95 bucks just for the community. But for me, I do not recommend them because to me, their foundation is fraud.
Well, Elle,
Do you think I'm being too harsh?
No, I don't, because they normally turn, in my own personal experience, again, it has been fraudulent. Like, it's just been crap. And going back to that scenario where, they promoted Emory or whatever school that was. It just so happened they were renting like a building out on that campus. So it wasn't even like that school was involved with the program. They probably didn't even tell them that they were dropping their name in their materials. So yeah.
There's a couple other things I have to say. One positive, one negative. Some people have, some of them have community service things that people have to do, and some people have found that to be beneficial. The community service hours, blah, blah, blah. But, here's another thing I don't like. The implication a lot of times is that this is something impressive that can go in your college application.
Right.
And I'll tell you, have anyone who doesn't believe me, when you go to a college fair and go up to an admission officer and ask them, what do you think about NSHSS? Because that one's more well known. The one I read to you, this is one that I wanted to let people know that there's so many different variations out there, and literally it just came in the mail. So it made sense to read it to you, but ask them, or just say these scholarship societies, they're asking for a fee, or don't even say they're asking for, say they're, my child is being recognized for this award, through this association. How does that look on my college application? I'll tell you what, if you're going to go up to a school, don't do it to one you want to apply to, because the mission officer is going to be thinking, are you really falling for that?
No,
so I would encourage you to ask it to one that you're not looking at applying to.
Oh my goodness.
I've never seen an admission officer ever that has ever said that this is a good thing. And if you put this in your awards on your application, somebody will just shake their head like, oh my goodness.
Don't do it. Move forth with extreme caution. That's the big takeaway.
Underscored, neon highlights, in lights. It is all good.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, I know I've been saying this for the last 3 weeks that you're going to enjoy this interview. with Gregory Roberts, the dean of admissions at the University of Virginia. But this final part is my favorite, because I just really admired that Greg was really transparent when talking about Charlottesville and what went down at Charlottesville and the conversations that happened at the University of Virginia afterward about what happened. He was just really transparent, and I thought it was the most riveting part of our interview. He also answers my question about how do you explain why UVA consistently has the highest graduation rate for public schools year after year. So we talk about that. And we also talk about the kind of student that thrives at the University of Virginia. And it's really kind of a window into what their admission office looks for in a student, the way in which he answers it. And then he has some really good answers when I put him on the hot seat in the lightning round. So I think you're going to enjoy it. Listen and enjoy. Great. Now let's talk about another time where at least Charlottesville and certainly UVA, because I walked on the campus, was in the news, and that was sort of the white supremacy rally that's just now referred to as Charlottesville. What type of internal conversations are happening at UVA in sort of in light of that, which is now a big part of American history?
Well, that was a stunning and despicable and sad and traumatic event for the community, for the country, I would argue. I watched Black Klansman when it came out, and I was in a theater, and I could hardly get up out of my seat at the end when they showed the images of the violence that occurred and the racism and bigotry. It's stunning and almost impossible to believe in this day and age that occurred or this exists. But it opened our eyes, I think. Charlottesville is a richly diverse and progressive college town. With that said, I think that it allowed us to take a look at our relationship with Charlottesville and President Ryan, and is after President Sullivan, who he arrived last year, right about it, the 1 year anniversary, has a good bit of his strategic plan moving forward as to how to best support our neighbors, and listen to their complaints and issues with housing and education locally and fair pay and these sorts of things. I think that we have a student body that is active and engaged, and the people that come to UVA are individuals who want to make a difference by and large. And I think that, if you are interested in fairness and the rights of others and equity and diversity, I can think of no better place to be at the moment, because we're having these important conversations about how we can contribute to this issue locally, with the hope that it expands nationally. But I will say that that we learned a lot. I think that mistakes were made. I think that not only by the city but by the university, we recognize that now. I don't think anyone could have anticipated what happened at the level it occurred, but we're working hard to try to find solutions and to be at the forefront of discussions about race relations and gender and issues of just equity and fairness and love and peace.
Well, and I think it's important to mention there's a lot of out-of-state agitators, right, that came into Charlottesville when they were going to take Confederate monuments down in the city of Charlottesville. And so I know I've had to tell a lot of students that I work with that you guys have been a leader in a lot of ways. I know one thing you and I talked about, Greg, isn't it now 21 straight years in a row that you have the highest Black student graduation rate of any public school? It's something like that. It's a staggering number.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, and you're right. I think that there's a misunderstanding sometimes of what occurred here. The further that you are from Charlottesville or even Virginia, the headlines are shocking, and it is amazing that a town that 2 years ago was, noted as the most beautiful or peaceful or town in the country is now a hashtag. And you think of Charlottesville as as an event as opposed to a place. But I also think, though, that it you when you live somewhere for a while and you have really well-meaning people, you tend to get complacent or pat yourself on the back a bit. And I think that this, despite the fact that you're right, most of the people were from other areas, and people here were standing up for diversity, and it was driven by the decision locally to remove the statues, which is a controversial issue nationally as well. It's still our town. There's still something that we can do about it. And there's still ways to improve. This is not a perfect place. No place is. But I'm proud of how we've responded. I think that our students are actively engaged here locally, and we want to make sure that this never happens again, and that we move forward.
I think that's a great response. Back to the graduation rate, because not only do 21 straight years the highest Black student graduation rate for public schools, but just your overall graduation rate for all students is consistently at the top. Leader, I think this year again, the highest graduation rate of any public school in the country. What do you attribute that to? And we know that there's a correlation between selectivity and graduation rate, right? If you're taking A students, they're more likely to graduate than a 2.5 student. But there are other highly selective public schools that have, substantially lower graduation rates than UVA has. So what you clearly have to be doing something to be consistently at the top of the graduation rate numbers. What's your theory on what you're actually doing to make that happen, besides just doing a phenomenal job in admissions and picking all the right kids? I know that's a big part of it.
You can send that to my boss. No. I mean, I think that we are looking for students who can and will make a difference, and some are students who have come from disadvantage and who are the first in their family to come to college. And we're realizing, of course, that these students have different needs and have different need different support. I think that there's also a big difference between graduation rates and the actual experience that the students have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we're always trying to measure things at universities, rightly so, and an obvious measure of success would be graduation rates, but that is diminished if the experience that the students have on a campus, on grounds at UVA, is vastly different from one population to the next. And so, for example, if first-generation students or low-income students are unable to participate in a study abroad program or an internship because they need a part-time job, then these are things that you need to address, because coming here, there's so many different opportunities. It's almost a problem. There's so many. It's almost endless.
Mm-hmm.
And you would hate to see students invest so much just to go to class and not fully engage in the life of the university. I do think that we've built really remarkable support networks and advising systems. These continue to evolve, whether they're peer advising or faculty advising also. So we're a mid-sized school.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are going to be some bigger classes. And for some, it's going to feel quite large because they're from a small town, even though we're not super big for a public. But trying to make connections with students and those that can help them develop relationships with faculty, mentors, advisors from lots of different areas, so that there's a pathway and there's a support network in place. And I think that that's a big reason. For African American students, there's a fabulous peer advising program run through the Office of African American Affairs. So all first-year students are paired with an upper-class student, and they students trust one another. They learn a lot. They learn lots of different things they might not learn from a faculty member. But if they can combine that with an RA that helps them, or an association dean in one of their schools, and a faculty member, now you have a network of people that are supporting a single student and helping them as they progress through their four-year life on grounds.
I really liked your answer to that, Greg, because you could have pounded your chest and But instead you said, hey, listen, graduation rate's not everything. Yeah, we got really, really impressive numbers there, but we're also looking at evaluating other ways in which we can improve the student experience. So I think that will resonate with a lot of people.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
I mentioned about a month and a half ago that I am so concerned about the epidemic of mental health issues in high schoolers and college students. I'm talking about things like depression, panic attacks, mood disorders, and suicidal thoughts. I told you I would share 10 resources to help you as a parent or educator deal with creating emotionally healthy children. Well, this book today is one of my favorites of the 10. The recommended resource for week 79 is the book Under Pressure, subtitled Confronting the Epidemic of Stress and Anxiety in Girls, and it's by Dr. Lisa Daymore. The truth is, these problems are most prevalent with girls. Now, one thing I really like about Under Pressure is it doesn't believe that all stress is bad. In fact, it actually believes there's good stress, and Daymore talks about it. She gives examples of healthy stress, such as speaking in front of a large group or confronting a colleague. And she talks about how these life experiences with healthy stress are designed to prepare you for life. But the book also looks at pathological stress, and it helps you to know whether the stress your child is experiencing is healthy stress or unhealthy stress. Under Pressure looks at the alarming level of anxiety and stress experienced by girls starting all the way in elementary all the way through college. And Under Pressure teaches you as a parent how to help your child manage this stress. But one of my absolute favorite things about Under Pressure is that it will definitely help you as a parent to manage your own stress. Dr. Daymore is a psychologist who is a consulting psychologist to an all-girls school, and she's been so for 15 years. And she draws on her experience in this role with girls. Another thing I really like about Under Pressure is that there is an action plan, a bonus plan that is included that will help you to implement the steps and implement them quickly. This is a real practical, insightful book I highly recommend. It is a New York Times bestseller. It is available in 5 formats: Kindle, paperback, hardback, audio CD, and as an audiobook. We will now return to the final part of my interview with Greg Roberts, the Dean of Admissions at the University of Virginia. Getting ready to wind down here in a few, but I want to ask you one last question. What type of student makes for a good student at UVA?
Well, of course, it's there are lots of different types, and so it's hard to generalize. But I think that we're looking for students who are looking at college as more than just a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
A 4-year pit stop before they get a good job and go on with their life. I mean, I think that a byproduct of going to a school like UVA is that you tend to be pretty marketable when you graduate. But we want the students that want to come here and help us become better. I believe that we can help students grow and learn personally and professionally and academically, but they can also help us become the best place we can be. I like students who are not afraid to take some academic risks. I once heard a student at the opening convocation. He was the 4th-year president addressing the newly arrived freshmen, the first years, and he encouraged them to get out of their comfort zone, to join a club where they might be the only one with a particular belief, or take a class that makes them uncomfortable, to stretch themselves a bit, to make mistakes, because now would be the time to try new things. It would be a shame to invest either financially and or in terms of your time at a college and just make it an extension of high school. This is a time to grow and learn and develop as scholars, as human beings. And so as we evaluate applications, we're looking for these types of interesting, creative, committed, passionate, thoughtful people who are good people, right?
Yeah.
Who are ethical and who help other people and who care for others and who are interested in joining a community of folks like that, while very different in many ways, have this shared responsibility and goal to contribute to the larger world.
Sounds great. Awesome. Well, I always close out with our guests with a few lighthearted questions. We call it the lightning round. Just kind of peels back the onion, get to know you more than just Greg Roberts, Dean of Admissions at UVA. So, cool, you can give a quick response, whatever comes to mind. If you had to select a career, knowing what you know now, and you couldn't pick college admissions, what would you select?
I would either be a photographer or in some way involved in documentary film.
Oh, nice. Fascinating. Little hobby on the side, it sounds like. Good stuff.
Yeah, I love to take pictures.
And what do you like to do to relax and have fun besides take pictures and do photography?
I like to go to movies. I actually have a book, a journal that has a list of every movie that I have seen at the theater since 1999 with the
Wow.
rating, the date, and who I have seen the movie with. Beyond that, to de-stress, I shoot free throws. It helps me unwind a little bit. I
Hey,
can't play anymore, but I can shoot free
there
throws.
you go. There you go. Tom Izzo from Michigan State does that. That's good stuff. What
Yeah, it's great.
What's your favorite place to vacation?
I like beaches.
Hmm.
My wife likes the mountains, so we have a little bit of conflict there. But I could lay on a beach with a book and hear the surf, and that's the type of relaxation I need after a long year.
Sounds good. So I know I've been to Charlottesville before and had some good meals there. What's your favorite restaurant in Charlottesville for someone that's planning on maybe visiting UVA this fall? Where do you recommend they eat?
Well, our family has unfortunately celiac disease, which means we have to be gluten free and some nut allergies, and so we're somewhat limited.
Hey,
There's a great place. It's a bit of a chain. It's maybe 5 or 6 of them nationally, I think, called Burton's. They're wonderful for those of you out there that have food allergies. But there are quite a few terrific Mexican restaurants in town, and Charlottesville, this place actually has more restaurants per capita than New York City, from what I'm told.
I'm
So
not
really a
surprised.
neat, cool, independently owned, funky places. I also like craft beer, so there's great craft breweries in Charlottesville.
Great. Best couple books you've read?
Oh goodness, I'm reading one right now on Chernobyl, which is not an uplifting, relaxing book. I I always liked the book Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. And these are there was a local author. Gosh, now I can't remember the name of the book. I liked The Kill a Mockingbird. My son's middle name is Atticus.
Wow.
That was before the second book came out, and it turned out that Atticus was slightly racist, so we might have to change his middle name. But great book nonetheless. In fact, I just read the book about Harper Lee. That was pretty interesting as well.
And then last question here, our rapid round, your best advice to students and parents. But really, college process. Yeah.
Oh, that's a long one, but I would say try to enjoy it. This is a big decision. It's a sort of a transformational process, and while it can be intense and stressful, in the end, you're going to find a home, and there are outstanding schools. And as they say, it's not where you go, it's how you go. And I would just plan, organize, and take a deep breath, and it'll all work out.
Awesome. Awesome. This is great. Anything, Greg, in closing that you haven't shared about UVA that's on your mind?
Other than the national championship, no.
You would do that. Just a little more salt in the wound. A little more salt in the
Yeah,
wound.
yeah. Again, I think that when we're introduced, I have to say that first and last in every speech. It's in my contract
I'm
now for the
sure.
next year.
Well, I'm sure you weren't complaining when we took down Duke. Well, did you want to play Duke or us? Because Duke gave you a lot of problems this year as well. I saw that.
Yeah, personally, I wanted to see them play Duke again because I thought they could beat them. But um, I'm good friends with Christoph down at Duke, and
Oh,
so we have
yeah.
a fun bit of a rivalry. He's of course, for the listeners, the dean of admission at Duke, a wonderful guy.
Yep. No, most definitely. Sounds great. Well, Greg, in closing, if you could maybe just give UVA's website, and I don't know if there are any social media handles or anything like that you want to share, but places where people could follow UVA and get some more information on UVA. What do you want to share with us there?
Sure, it's pretty easy. It's www.virginia.edu. Pretty logical. I would say that we have one of my senior deans, Janine Lalonde, affectionately known as Dean J. She's a prolific blogger, social media expert in our field, very well known and respected, and she's got a terrific social media presence and does a great job, I think, demystifying the college process and trying to provide really accurate and timely information to families. And so that's a pretty good place to start.
Listen, Greg, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your generosity with your time, and I'll see you next week. We're going to be up in Boston together at a conference. I'll see you in a week. I'm looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Marks.
Right.
Take care.
All right.
Next week in the news, when colleges seek diversity through Photoshop. Ooh, I can't wait to read that one, Mark. We'll be in chapter 80 of 171 Answers, and Mark is giving admissions advice for non-traditional students when choosing a college. And it's time for a bonus episode. It looks like we're talking about a new push for test optional 1 year after our University of Chicago breaking news. And Mark will be interviewing Mr. Daniel Green. This is really awesome. He's an avid listener to Your College Bound Kid, dedicated listener to Your College Bound Kid. And he shares with us, this is a parent, understanding how the Trello app can help you stay organized with the college process. Yay, Your College Bound Kid listener. It's going to be awesome.
Anika, you know where I head Tuesday morning?
Where are you going?
Stanford for 5 days. So when the time,
this is
yeah. So by the time this episode airs, I will have been back. And then our next episode, I'll have to share some highlights of that trip with our listeners at the end of our time. But I'll be up there in California, Palo Alto for 5 days. Looking forward to it.
Cali, don't come back with the jet lag.
At least I won't be coming back talking Harvard, Stanford. I don't know. No, the California, it's like so chill, laid back, like hop on your, what do they call those, skateboards and with your shorts and go sailing.
You're going to be up there surfing, Mark.
Surfing. Come back with my surfboard on the plane.
Oh, goodness. That would be awesome.
You know I love to travel, so I get excited about trips.
Clearly you do. And we love to hear all about it when you get back. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.